defense does not agree with the decision.
Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Breezy Scorecard. Today, we're looking at one of the most controversial heavyweight fights of all time, George Foreman versus Shannon Briggs, and what would turn out to be George Foreman's final fight. So Shannon Briggs got the decision in this one, but most people scored it for Foreman. The judges officially had it for Briggs. Steve Weisfeld, it was a majority decision. Steve Weisfeld had it 114 even. Larry Layton had it 117 for Briggs, which getting Briggs to 117 to most fans and to me seems wild. I mean, that comes out to 7 rounds to Briggs, 3 rounds to Foreman, 2 rounds even. So getting Briggs to 117 seems a little out of hand. And of course, Calvin Claxton had it 116-112, 8 rounds to 4 for Briggs. So Reese's scorecard on this one is actually 10-2 for George Foreman, 118-110. There are a couple close ones. I see most fans had rounds 7 and 10 for Briggs. I gave rounds 7 and 10 both to Foreman. So I would say 116-112 to 118-110 is a permissible scorecard for Foreman. If you've been watching these videos, you know I'm pretty hesitant to call most fights a robbery because there's usually enough back and forth, something you could look at from the other guy to understand a judge's viewpoint. This one, I'm not so hesitant about. I have to call this one a true heavyweight heist. I think Foreman won this one going away. I think he won rounds, everything except for rounds 1 and round 6. Round 10, I labeled as extremely close. So, if you gave that one to Briggs, I'm fine with that. And like I said, I see most people gave round 7 to Briggs. So 8-4 Foreman, I think is fine. Even 115, 113, 7-5 for Foreman would be extremely close, a little too close for my taste. And when you get to where the judges had it 114, 114, 117, 113, 116, 112, I just don't see how you get there. And an interesting side note, before I get into my round by round breakdown, an interesting side note about this fight, it took place in New Jersey, and 2 of the judges, Larry Layton, this was only the 14th fight Larry Layton ever scored professionally. And this was only the 17th fight that Calvin Claxton ever scored professionally. So if you know anything about professional judging, you would know most guys, most men and women probably have about 50 to 100 or even more fights than that before, they even sniff these kind of fights, which, I was 4 years old when this fight happened. So I don't know about the magnitude of it, but I imagine it was one of the bigger fights in boxing. Obviously, Foreman was a huge name. Briggs was an up-and-comer. He's never been at the top level of the sport, but just based on Foreman's name, I imagine this was one of the biggest fights in boxing at the time. So you couldn't imagine somebody in their 14th fight, Larry Layton, and this was only the 6th card he had ever worked. So he had worked 14 fights. He had only worked 6 pro cards. Calvin Claxton, this was a 17th fight, and he had only worked 9 pro cards, and they were already judging one of the biggest cards in boxing. And if you look at the undercard, it's a pretty loaded undercard. I believe Fernando Vargas in his 7th fight is on this card. David Tua, perennial heavyweight challenger, is on this card. So it was a huge card to have people with that little of experience judging on it. So that's just a little interesting side note. And now let's get to my little breakdown. Round by round, 1 through 12, Foreman versus Briggs. So round 1, I scored for Briggs. You got to think about this. After round 1, I scored it 10-1 for Foreman because round 1, I scored for Briggs. I scored it close. So Briggs controlled most of the round. Briggs controlled most of the round with his jab. So he is at different parts of this fight, he is landing a nice little jab. It's just he's not doing much behind it. Sometimes he's throwing the straight right hand, and sometimes, especially when they're in the clinch, he's throwing the right hook to the body. But besides the jab, the straight right hand and the right hook to the body, he does next to nothing in this fight. He does very little. And the problem with him having a good jab is that Foreman has a better jab. So any round, there's some rounds where Briggs plausibly could win the round because he comes out strong with the jab, but by the end of the round, Foreman has out jabbed him and done a little bit more in other areas. So I give the first round of Briggs. Foreman does get active late, but out of all the punches that get through that you score in this round, they're mostly Briggs jabs. So 10-9 Briggs. Round two, I give to Foreman. And this is one where Briggs is landing the jab early. But Foreman is starting to land with both hands when he throws. So this is the theme of the fight. He's working in with the jab, and then he starts putting that beautiful short right hand behind it, and he's starting to land it. Later in the fight, he'll start throwing, he'll abandon the jab a little bit and start throwing some one-off left hooks to Briggs's head that are landing. And by the end of the fight, he's landing like 58% of his punches. So every time he's throwing, he's landing a great deal. Briggs is landing his jabs. What else I got for him? Landing with both hands when he throws. And then Foreman at the end of this round throws a nice left uppercut that rocks Briggs, seals the round for Foreman. So 1-1, 19-19 even at the end of round two. Round three, clear Foreman round. He's connecting on everything he throws. I barely wrote any notes here. He's throwing the jab. He's throwing the straight right hand. He's throwing a right hook behind the jab sometimes. So sometimes he's coming in with the jab and the straight right. Then when he starts to feel Briggs's tempo, Briggs's timing, he starts to throw some harder stuff. So he gets that right hook off behind the jab a couple times this round. And I wonder what his punch stats are for this round because they're probably crazy. I mean, he probably lands well north of 50% of his punches this round, and he throws a hell of a lot of punches too. So this is just one of Foreman's clearest rounds of the fight. Round four, another clear Foreman round. So for the first half of the round, I note that Briggs is throwing and landing, but he's mostly landing the jab. He's landing some harder stuff, some right hooks to the body, but nothing that really gets Foreman's attention. And a lot of these rounds, Briggs comes out with the jab, but Foreman starts imposing his will so thoroughly on the round that by the end of it, Foreman's landing at will. So you forget, like, for the first 60 seconds of the round that Briggs, the only thing that was landing was the Briggs jab, because Foreman just puts his imprint on the round by the time 180 seconds are over. So Foreman is kind of stunning him this round with everything he throws. I wouldn't say Briggs is hurt by anything Foreman throws this round, but every time Foreman's touching him, Briggs kind of realizes, like, whoa, this guy can hit pretty hard. This is George Foreman I'm in the ring with. So every time Foreman's landing that jab, because he has such a beautiful thunderous jab that snaps Briggs's head back. Then when he's putting that straight right hand behind it, he definitely has Briggs running around. So much to the point that by the end of round four, there's almost no action because Briggs, after he tastes Foreman's power, becomes pretty hesitant to engage. And George is 48 at this time. So anytime Briggs is hesitant to engage, I think Foreman rests a little. So I did note that at the end of this round, there's very little action by the end, but a clear Foreman round. Round five, I score for Foreman. I marked this one extremely close. And it's because Foreman's more judicious this round, but he's still landing when he throws. And he's landing a heavy jab, and he's landing the straight right hand when he throws it. The problem this round is that his percentages are probably pretty high, but his amount of punches thrown are probably pretty low. So you just have to score the fact that Briggs is finding his range again. He's scoring with the jab again, but he's not landing anything that gets Foreman's attention. And when Foreman is throwing this round, he's throwing with bad intentions, that mean jab, that hard straight right hand, and he's landing it when he throws, but he's barely throwing this round. So I labeled it for Foreman, and I labeled it extremely close. Round six, I gave to Briggs extremely close. Most people, I looked at some of the fan scorecards on BoxRec, and there's another fan website that just posts nothing but fan scorecards. Most people seem to have round six for Briggs clear. I have it for Briggs extremely close, and it says he's finally putting together combinations. So when he's throwing the jab, he's throwing the straight right hand behind it. Every once in a while, when they get close near the clinch, because Briggs is getting warned a lot when they're in the clinch. And the referee, I don't remember the referee's name, but I would say he's getting a little too involved. He's over reffing this a little bit. So I think Briggs is a little hesitant to throw when they're not even in the clinch, when they're just working on the inside, the referee's warning them. But this round, Briggs does throw some good right hooks to the body when they're near the clinch. So he's winning it. He's winning it early for me. I haven't noted that he lands a good right uppercut late. And I don't even think the commentators notice it because they're not expecting much from Briggs. So sometimes when he's working, they're not even noting it, but he does land a really good right-handed uppercut late that I think seals him the round. Foreman this round is landing the jab. The jab is stiff, but in this round particularly where Briggs is throwing a lot and where Briggs lands that solid uppercut, I just can't give Foreman this round just on the jab, but his jab is so much more powerful than most that I still have it extremely close. So after 6, 4 rounds to 2 for George Foreman, what would 4 rounds to 2 come out to? 58 to 56? Yeah, 58 to 56 for Foreman at the halfway point. Then round 7, I have this one for Foreman close. I have a star next to it because this is a round that apparently a lot of people give to Briggs. And that makes sense. That makes sense because he starts off the round strong. He's out jabbing Foreman like he does at the beginning of most rounds. But by the end of the round, I think people like to give this one to Briggs just because it feels like, he should get a moral victory this one because, he fights for longer spurts than he does in most rounds. But you can't tell me that by the end of this round that Foreman hasn't completely imposed his will, that by the end of the round, it's Foreman's jab that's getting through. It's Foreman's straight right hand that's getting through. There's no way you could convince me that in round 7 in particular, because round 10, there's probably a sharper argument, but in round 7 in particular, you couldn't tell me that you want to be Briggs in that round. Because by the time Foreman's getting through in this round, he's really getting through. He's really putting the leather on Briggs. And I think if we're using the Max Kellerman thing, who would I rather be in that round? I think you would have to say Foreman. So I give round 7 to Foreman, but I will note that a lot of people do give it to Briggs. Round 8 is a clear Foreman round. I mean, this is probably his strongest round of the fight. He just unloads everything on Briggs. He's landing the hard jab. He's landing the short straight right hand behind the jab. And this is the round where I think he kind of introduces the single shot wide left hook. Before this round, this is almost like a staple of his arsenal in this fight in the later rounds. And I would say before round 8, he's not really throwing it at all. But by the time he thinks he has Briggs right where he wants him, he starts kind of abandoning his jab, which is tough because he has a beautiful jab. It's working really well for him in this fight. I think by the end of the fight, he lands like 60%. He throws and lands like a crazy number of jabs. I don't have the punch stats right in front of me, but it's something like 138 of 240, just something you never see, something you would see in Fight Night where he's really teeing off with the jab, but he abandons it a little this round in favor of that like a wide single shot left hook. Because Briggs' defense is pretty bad, and so Foreman just makes the calculation. Some of these times, I'm just going to go straight with the left hook, and I'm just going to forget about the jab for a little bit. So 5 rounds to 3 after 8 for George Foreman. Round 9, I give to Foreman clear. I will say that this is one where it's like round 8. It's one of his better rounds of the fight, but this time probably just for the first 120 seconds. So by the last 60 seconds, he's pretty winded. But what he's doing at the beginning is he's getting through, and Briggs is fighting back. Like you'll notice in this fight that Larry Merchant is like really hard on Briggs. And Briggs is one of those guys who when I followed his career growing up, he was kind of considered something like of a joke by the boxing media. And I never quite got it. He was a talker for sure. But if you look at his record and you look at, how hard he fought Lewis, and he ended up getting knocked out, but he definitely went out on his shield in that fight. I never quite got like why he was such a joke to the boxing media, but you can almost see like a narrative building here with how Larry Merchant talks about him in this fight. And they're just quoting Teddy Atlas, his former trainer, calling him a quitter and stuff. But, it seems unfair because even in this round that I clearly score for Foreman, he's throwing back. Both men are having their moments, like I said. But Foreman is getting through with the harder shots. He's getting through with the cleaner shots. And the jab is touching Briggs whenever he wants it to. Then so he'll go in with the jab, and then, you know, by the third or fourth time, he'll go straight in with the left hook, and he'll hit Briggs with it almost every time. And Briggs is throwing back this round, but Foreman is smothering most of Briggs's best work. So he's getting near him to not quite a clinch, but where they're shoulder to shoulder, and he's kind of smothered up with him. And by the time Briggs is getting off, Foreman's catching most of it with the gloves. So that's a pretty clear Foreman round. 6-3 for Foreman after 9. I score round 10 for Foreman. I have it labeled extremely close. I have a star next to it because that's apparently one of the ones that a lot of the fans give to Briggs. Harold Letterman gave this one to Briggs as well. He comes out strong. So he comes out strong. He lands a few combinations. Roy Jones notes, hey, look, here comes Briggs. He's coming out this round. He's landing his jab. And really, he only has 3 punches this fight. He has the jab, he has the straight right hand, and he has the right hook to the body. I really couldn't tell you anything else. I think maybe there's an uppercut in one of these rounds that he lands, but I really, besides that, I can't say anything really that Briggs lands. But he comes out strong, and he flurries a couple times. He gets like maybe he'll get a moral victory in this round thing behind him. But Foreman dominates most of the round with his jab. So if Briggs comes out strong for the first 30 seconds, then for the next 2 minutes and 15 seconds, Foreman's dominating with the jab. He's putting the straight right hand behind it. But in the last 15 seconds, Briggs lands a huge combination that evens up the round. So I can't begrudge you if you give this round to Briggs. I gave it to Foreman, and I'm glad I did, because at the beginning of the next round on the broadcast I watched on YouTube, they show the huge combination again. And really, he just gets through with the initial body shot, which I believe is a hard right hook to the body. Then his follow through, the left hook and the right hand he throws behind it don't really land clean. So it's an eye-popping kind of combination, and it looks good in real time. But upon watching it again, he doesn't really land enough there that I think it offsets Foreman dominating like 2 minutes and 15 seconds of that round. So I scored that one for Foreman. I scored extremely close. I won't begrudge you if you give that one to Briggs, but at this point I have it 7-3 for Foreman. If it was a 10-round fight, I would have Foreman winning 97-93. And then I give the last 2 rounds for Foreman. And I don't even have these ones as extremely close. I label them both close. Harold Letterman gave round 11 to Briggs. So me and Letterman's scorecard differs just in that he gave 10 and 11 to Briggs. I gave 10 and 11 to Foreman. He has it 8-4, 116-12 Foreman at the end of the fight. But I give it to Foreman because both guys are having their moments. But the theme of the later rounds is Foreman is getting through with the harder, cleaner shots. I mean, that's really all there is to it. It's kind of like a lazier round 8 or round 9. I wouldn't say this is one of his best rounds of the fight, but he's getting through. He's finding a home for the left hook, and Briggs isn't really getting through with anything besides the jab by this point. So after 11, 10-9 for Foreman, 8-3 for Foreman going into the final round, round 12. And Foreman is just dominant at the beginning of this round. I don't know what they told Foreman in his corner. If they told him, hey, they're going to rob you, because, you know, that we know what ended up happening with the scorecards. But Foreman comes out on fire. Maybe, you know, he's 48, so he knows he's not going to have to. And this was his last fight. So I was going to say he knows he's not going to have to fight another round after this, but really he's not going to have to fight another fight after this. So he comes out with everything for the first 2 minutes. He's nailing Briggs with the left hook. He's nailing Briggs with the straight right hand. He's still setting up with the jab. So he's still hitting him with the jab. He's doing everything for the first 2 minutes. He tires out a little. So Briggs does rally in the last 60 seconds to even up the round a little. He doesn't land anything really too noteworthy. So there's nothing that Briggs lands in the last 60 seconds that I think he does better, where you would score the round for him. But it should be noted that he really gets his ass kicked for the first 2 minutes, and he comes back and fights strong for the last minute of the fight. So you have to give props to Shannon the Cannon for, you know, coming back, finishing strong, finishing the round on his feet. But I do give the round 10-9 to Foreman. Probably along with round 8 and 9, one of his better rounds of the fight. He doesn't finish it very strong, but it's a pretty strong Foreman round. So at the end of 12, Reezy scorecard 118 to 110 for Big George Foreman. I would say he deserved to win his final fight. He certainly deserved this one. It's really tough that he didn't end up getting this one. It's really tough that he had judges that were scoring their 17th and 14th fight total, 31 total fights judged between two of the two judges that gave it to Shannon Briggs. So it's a tough way to go out for him. Usually I resist the word robbery, but in this case, in the case of Big George Foreman versus Shannon the Cannon Briggs, we had a heavyweight heist. Foreman deserved to win this one. I had him winning big, 118 to 110.